This is the Owl of Wisdom. Like and subscribe for 10 years of good luck. If you don't, it won't be pretty. Children of single parents. Who was the worst person your parent has dated? My dad started dating a woman who firmly believed that I was part of his old life and that he needed to cut ties with me. I was 14 and became terrified my mum would find someone who would do the same, and I'd end up with no family. He was called Greg. He was an abusive wanker. He used to lock me and my brothers out in the rain while my mum was at work. Had no way of contacting her. Before kids had phones. He did it in all weathers. He broke my mum's arm in front of me and my brothers. He grabbed my face so hard his nail left a cut in my cheek. My mum and my 2 aunties got their own back though. My mum stole his change jar. His change jar had notes in. There were number 1 PS or 2 PS. Only silver plus. One auntie smashed every single thing he had. Car windows, house windows, TVS, everything. She also promised to beat him whenever she sees him. She's kept that promise and has hit him 7 times so far on nights out. My other auntie kept reporting him to his boss for things he hadn't done, but they couldn't disprove. Like being horrible, swearing at her. He was fired. He was a real piece of shit, and the actions of my family may have been drastic, if not illegal, but he most definitely deserved this. Well, as far as my mom's concerned, my dad is the clear winner. Bastard thought feeding a baby coke and beer till she passed out was parenting. Then he thought that beating the out of anyone who questioned him and locking his daughter in the crawl space till she stopped crying was healthy parenting. Managed to cut him out of my life at 16. At 19 he tried to shoot the cops that came to answer the domestic violence call. He missed, but the cops firing back riddled his 86-year-old neighbor with bullets. He's up for parole in 4 years. None of his girlfriends liked me, so they didn't give a shit. Some of them enjoyed it. Mum's not perfect either, but I'm gonna take emotional neglect over dad's nonsense any day. My stepdad, after being with my mom for 18 years, he finally told me he and a friend of his killed my dad. Or possible the arsehole she's with now. My mom dated a dude who beat the living shit out of me. Dude and his brother took turns punching me in the face while the other held me down. I was about 11 at the time. My mom didn't bother to remove these turds from her life either. I am now in my 40s and still have scars on my face to remind me about it. A few months later, while I was at a summer camp paid for by a charity organization, the same dude put her in the hospital. A few weeks after that, I went to live with my aunt and uncle. She stayed with a dude. I haven't spoken to her in close to 20 years. My dad's ex-fiancée. She was almost our evil stepmother until one day she decided to call me a fat lazy bitch, and my dad realized how awful she was to my sister and I. That was the day I learned how much he actually cared for us as well. He dumped her ass and kicked her out of the house. Her awful daughter left too, and it was finally peaceful at my dad's again. He dated her on and off for years afterwards until she went back with her ex-husband. My dad has sworn her off for good now, which I'm glad for since she was a toxic person. I wish he could find someone worth his time though. I know he gets lonely. My mom dated an alcoholic. He beat her right in front of me and my brother. One time she was taking a shower, and he grabbed her by the hair and threw her outside when she was wet and naked. Everyone could see and it was humiliating to watch. I couldn't do anything. He was bigger and stronger than my brother and she stayed with this abusive arsehole for like 4 years. I became traumatized and I hate alcohol. Alcohol scares me so much, but lately I've been trying to get over it. Alcohol shouldn't scare me forever. I've been letting my BF drink and I've freaked out a couple times, but the past couple days I've been getting more comfortable around him drinking. It's not fair to freak out when he drinks just because of bad experience. He's not the same guy. He won't hurt me. I mean there were so many, but I think it's a tie between the pathological liar, the one with anger management issues, and the weed addict with the thumb ring. My mom got back together with her old high school boyfriend for whatever reason. Guy was like 60 but looked about a minute away from death. Super lanky, reeked of cigarettes. Not a bad guy, but his general hygiene and health made him hell to be around. My dad met this woman that he thought was perfect. They got along really well, and so they got married 5 years later, and I've moved out after being emotionally abused by this amazing woman for years. It was bad enough that I kept trying to kill myself. She told me that I was a bad person who would never achieve anything. She told me that my stepdad deserved to die and that my mother was a bad person. She told me that I was a disappointment and a burden. She lied to my dad and told him that I hit her. She called the police on me for locking myself in my own room. At one point she slammed a door in my face and the towel rack on the back gave me a black eye. She gaslighted me about everything. She wanted to keep me on medications that kept me from functioning because I was easier to handle when I didn't fight to be treated like a human. All my friends were satanic punks and I wasn't allowed to be happy because my laugh was loud and obnoxious. She called me selfish for wanting to be treated better. She told all her friends I was a delinquent despite being a quiet straight A student. She was a rude, manipulative cunt. She ruined my mental health and I am still working to fix all the damage she caused. My dad isn't happy but he won't leave her. She is a horrible person whom I have no respect for. TL. Doctor, my stepmom abused me and is abusing my dad. My mom dated a guy named Mike. He had this weird rule that when he called the house, this is 1997 to 1998 before we had caller ID, he would let it ring twice, hang up and call again when we would be good to answer it. I was probably 10 during this. I remember not liking him and would answer the phone first ring every time just to piss him off. He wasn't a bad guy, just a giant douche. I know one kid's answer would be my brother. He's a cop who's off with bad PTSD, but how he talks about it is both hilariously direct and tragic. Don't get wrong. He is honestly my hero and is a great cop and man if there is one. But a complicated guy, all said. So he asks me one day, when your kids are out of control, do you discipline them? Well, of course. Well, fucking Vicky doesn't and it's crazy. But that little bastard hates me now, but hopefully he'll be better for it. What did you do? Well, let's just say, she left me at home with him and he was a disrespectful brat. I ordered him to go to his room and he told me he f***ed my mom. So first I reminded him that no, it was me who was f***ing his mom in the ass most often cause he mom was a whore in the bedroom. Then when he got all stupid about it, I barricaded his room door so he actually couldn't get out cause he kept trying to. Then finally I realized the little asshole was playing video games, so I cut the power to his room. Then I lorted at him while he was crying. Isn't that a bit extreme? I didn't try to kill him or want to kill him, so my therapist said it was progress. But next time I should call the mom. I was semi-famous at the time Elvis impersonator singer for a band that had some success, and he's incredibly cocky and arrogant. My mom ended up marrying him, but they live in different states and only see one another here and there. It turned out to be a marriage of convenience after a few years. Well, this is probably the saddest you've heard. My mom was married to an abusive alcoholic who she separated from. The first guy she dated that I remember was married to someone else and was a complicated situation. I remember his son spending time with us a few times and really enjoyed it as we were close in age. He was probably the best of them, but her parents separated the two and took her away from the city. Next she dated another man for 4+ years who was also married but was separated from his wife. This was kinda fucked up because his ex-wife's name was same as my mom's and he had a daughter with the same name as me. I liked his daughter too and we got along well. She was a couple years older than me. This didn't work out as he was still a boy, and I later came to know was interested in my older sister while dating my mom. Finally she dated a colleague of hers. He was much younger and was in a position higher than her. I remember their relationship changed over time from a respectful older friend momly figure to affair. I heard him tell her that he would never do what all the other men in her family did to her. My mom believed this BS maker also and thought they would be married. One day, after a couple of years of dating, he called up to say his parents wouldn't let this relationship work and how he was having second thoughts. There were other shit going on with her life along with these dating problems and was very depressed, which I understand now as an adult but didn't have an idea as a child. She killed herself not too long after that and her affair made sure she was cremated and not buried so that no evidence of his affairs with her would come out to destroy his reputation as her boss. Phew. Thousands of dollars of therapy. I can think of two. First of all, my biological father. They got back together for a few weeks. He was a dick. I'd recently got my first pet, a ginger kitten, but I was having previously unknown allergy issues with it. Things were stabilizing for me though and I was getting used to it when one day my new cat disappeared. My dad admitted he let it out the door because he knew I'd been struggling. I spent weeks searching but never found it. The second was my stepdad. He was actually a really good guy and head over heels in love with my mom. I actually miss him a lot. The reason he was one of the worst? Well, my mom died when I was 17 and overnight my stepdad changed. Within a month he was in a relationship with another family member and suddenly he was violent and abusive. Left me with no food or money, attacked me for accidentally breaking an ornament of his, and ultimately forced me to run away from home. I was on couch hopping for 9 months and never spoke to him again. My mom dated this one guy for 5+ years. She was already a bad parent but with him she acted like we didn't exist. They would argue and have sex till like 1 AM most nights so I would go to school very tired. He didn't even acknowledge us and she didn't care. The only time he did he would snitch on me for small things. The few times she was home they had her door locked and sometimes I would try to talk to her because I was being bullied and she didn't find out till years later and at that time I had been coping with never seeing my dad and the door was locked so I'd just go off and cry. I confronted her about it once and she said he was the one who locked the door. But like still bitch, I'm your kid. He was also cheating on her and he pretty much beat her one day and she made me call the police. They broke up again after that. That all happened like 2 years ago. This was all while I was like a preteen and up and I was actually trying to bond with my mom. I still don't really have a connection with her because of him and don't love her. He still comes over to her house and spends the night. Also he used to live off of her. He's never had a real job. Everyone sees him as a sin and I still get questioned as to why I don't like him. Everyone was mad at me when I was 14 because he came over to my mom's house months after he beat her and he said hi to me and I said ew. My mom was pissed. I now tell her to her face she's bad at picking men and that she's never going to be happy if she keeps picking homeless abusive men. She's still in love with him according to her. Not sure if this exactly counts, but my mom and dad had split custody over me, and I will be seeing my dad every other weekend. My dad married my stepmom Jenny, who is the most evil person I have ever met in my life. It wasn't immediate though. For the first few years she was great and I loved being over because my actual mom is a terrible alcoholic. But when she had her own kids something changed. I no longer was allowed to leave my own room except to go to the bathroom. So I was kept prisoner, completely isolated for all of my childhood every other weekend. But the isolation wasn't the worst of it. She made sure to come in and tell me I was fat and ugly and that nobody liked me. She emotionally abused me as much as she could and told me if I told my dad I would ruin his life because I would ruin the marriage, and I ate that shit up. There's countless horrible things she did, like having her kids beat me with pots and pans to wake me up, throwing food at me. The list goes on. The worst thing I think she had done was when my grandpa died, the only real father figure in my life. She said, "How does it feel knowing you'll never see your grandpa again?" and then laughed at me. But the worst part about it is that I thought I was doing the right thing telling nobody because my dad seemed happy with her. Now I've come to realize even if I had told my dad, he likely wouldn't have left her being the coward he is. I still don't understand how she could justify abusing a kid who already came from a broken home. But I've moved past all of that. I've long since cut them from my lives. So f you, Jenny. I hope you live an unfulfilling life. My mom is a serial dater. I have long since stopped paying attention to who she was dating. There were a few doozies, so let me talk about them. B. He came into my life when I was still forming self-awareness and memories. All I remember of him was screaming at my mom about leaving. G. A drunk who was verbally abusive. I remember him once deciding that I was not to leave the table until I had finished every bite of the meatloaf that he made that night out of the blue. I threw up after stuffing myself with it. Mum stood there while this new rule was randomly enforced. He also called my brother, who had been injured, a bastard because he had complained of pain while standing up. Apparently that was a personal attack, and he needed to cuss out a 5th grader. M. A foster parent of 8 very unwell boys. I was the only girl in the house. There was sexual abuse that I was blamed for from his foster boys and from his own son. He would scream at me like his foster children because I didn't want to play basketball with them. I was screamed at for humming. He eventually had to move me into his closet, so that's where I slept, while he would drop his clothing on me in the morning. He was cheating on my mom while she fed and clothed and parented all 11 children in that house. When they broke up, Mom blamed me because I had torn the family apart when I told a teacher about the sexual abuse I was experiencing. Some guy she met at a bar. He was really interested in meeting her children, specifically 10-year-old me. Within 2 hours of him coming into the house, he had invited us all out to a nude beach nearby. It was very freeing. He insisted, and he thought I would love it there. Mum didn't make him leave the house for the night, and I slept in her room with the door locked. P. Of all the assholes, this is who I hate the most. They dated on and off for a few years. I hated him from the minute I met him because my gut and my history had already labeled him as untrustworthy and a shithead. I wasn't wrong. Not only did he cheat on my mom throughout their relationship, he had hidden his AIDS status with my mom and also insisted, culturally, that he could not wear condoms. Mom thankfully hasn't tested positive for HIV, but part of me wants to report that Thanks for watching the Chronicles of Reddit. Like and subscribe for a marvelous life of adventure.